Okay, so we're checking out the new Flywoo Naked V2 GoPro. This is available as you can buy with the GoPro in it, or just as the case with all the accessories. Those links will be down in the video description, but this is the version 2 CNC metal, as you can see here. The version that I have here is the 9, of course. They just come in 10, 11, and 12 as well. I believe all the internals are the same between the four. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm not 100% sure, so you should probably ask them for those specific details. So I was kind of wondering, maybe swapping in like the Hero 11 into this, that's probably going to be fine. Now, there's a bunch of new changes here, obviously, other than the fact that it's CNC metal now. We'll go over that here in this video. And I will also cover the new updated, well, I guess these are brand new. These are 20 by 20 and 30 by 30 flight stacks, GOKU F722 Pros. So I will talk about that a little bit later in the video. But let's talk about the naked GoPro case first and what is different. First off, they sent me these ND filters. It does come with a UV filter already attached here. As you can see right there, it says UV filter there. You just pop that off. It's just held on by friction. I believe these are the same as the ones from the previous generation, because I did check the size compared to the old case, and it does seem to fit. So on this one, you get an ND4, 8, 16, and 32. So you have to buy that separately. I believe the case does come with the UV filter. You can also buy spares of those. If you lose them or if you break them, you can get extras of those. This one has the screen in the front here. This one here is the 11 on the version 1 case. This is plastic, and I'll show you what the weight difference is. All right, so the version 2 is coming in at a 48.9, basically 49 grams, and then the version 1 is coming in at 46.2. So it's about almost 3 grams heavier for the all metal CNC version. And looking at it in terms of dimensions, it's a little bit shorter than the version 1. So kind of sort of line up the bottom here, and you can see it's the version 1's a little bit taller. I believe the width should be the same because it's got the same internal boards. The version 1's a little bit wider, maybe a millimeter. It's not that much different. And then here's the side profile. So obviously the lens and everything is in the same spot, so pretty similar there. Taking a look at the bottom, nothing there. You have the micro SD card slot on this side, and yeah, the version 2 all metal case definitely looks a lot nicer than the version 1 plastic case. Still have the cooling fan here on the back. I believe it's the same cooling fan, just obviously a little bit. It's covered in metal here on this side. Got same power buttons and record button here in the same spots. I believe the board's pretty similar. There's a different connector here now on this board, whereas on the version 1 it's sideways, and you have the same solder pads if you want to solder on a power connector. This mount point here is now gone from the back of the case of the version 1. Instead, you have this USB-C port, and that's not for power. Specifically says do not use USB power. It's for the GoPro LCD only. So when you buy this, you have the option of buying the screen with it, which you may or may not need. You might need it if you want to do firmware updates, but or just you just want a bigger screen to look at. Maybe do like play back the videos you've just recorded. And this is also metal. All this is metal here. This is not for power. It's just for the screen connector, and it just pops into the back like this. You have to wait for it to snap into place. There we go. And then when you turn it on, you'll have access to the screen. It works just like the regular GoPro. It's actually the GoPro screen. It's got touchscreen functions and all that. All of that works just as normal. Do not plug USB-C for power into here. You're going to use something like this here, some sort of a balance lead adapter to like a BEC, and then you have these plugs here that go. This one here has a little retainer, so they're going to plug in over here like so for power. Now they're going to sell a updated version of this. This is, I think, from the old V2 setup with the new. They just replaced this side here. I believe they're going to have a new one that's going to be available later. I'll link that down in the video description when that comes out. It wasn't available at the time when they shipped this to me, so I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but I've told that this is going to be a little bit different. It'll be a separate part as well. But you can actually make those pretty easily yourself. I have a whole video on how to do that. And you have a bunch of the same connectors here. So if you want to, connect this up to a drone with a BEC on there already, you'll have several of these available, and then you just plug that into the back of your GoPro here to power it up. And then you have this weird magnetic connector here. It's for this. And you're like, well, what the hell is this? So this obviously is magnetic. It attaches to the back there. You see it just snaps into place. And this is the other side. This is the GoPro battery connector. So you need this to do firmware updates. For whatever reason, when you do firmware updates on the GoPro, if you don't have a battery connected, it freaks out and it doesn't work. That's always been the case. That's been like that way forever. The workaround for that was on the old V1 case, you'd have to take it out of the case and then plug in the battery. I think there's a connector for this that goes into the board, and then you could do the firmware update. So I actually haven't been able to do the labs firmware update on these guys, even though newer versions of the firmware have come out for the 10, 11, and 12. The one in the 9 is pretty old. It came out in 2022, and that's what's on here, and they haven't updated it since then. So having this on the 9, at least as of today, is kind of pointless because it has the latest firmware as of I think it was June or July of 2022, and they haven't updated it since then. They probably, because this is probably not going to get updated again. But that's there for the newer versions, and if newer versions of Labs firmware come out for the 10, 11, or 12, then that's what that is for on the back of this case. And again, power button here, record button here. You have these screw mounts over here, little screw holes here, and over here on the side. It's for these mounts attached to the side. So you got your standard GoPro finger mounts here. And this is also CNC metal. And then you have a smaller mount here for, I think, an M3 screw. And you can see it's got 4 screw holes there. And we can, you have it on this side here for vertical mounting. So you can mount it like this, or you can mount it like this. So you can slide it over, and then they do include the small screws that you're going to need to mount that. These are right here in this bag. So you can mount this onto the side of the camera like so, and then you can do your vertical video like that, and this will just mount to a standard GoPro mount, or you can mount it like this over here. So like this, they give you an option of mounting it underneath the camera lens to keep it centered to where the drone's flying, or if you want the camera centered, you can mount it over here like this. So kind of said they have those options. This is a pretty cool thing. And of course they include a regular TPU mount as well with your standard GoPro finger mounts here. And so you mount this on the drone. That way you can slide the naked GoPro in and out of this mount here if you want to move it from a drone to a different drone. So of course, because it has Labs firmware on there, you can just use the QR code app and put your settings in there, point the camera, obviously once it's powered on, point the camera at the QR code, and it'll change all the settings according to the settings you input into the app. You can also connect this to the Quick app, the GoPro Quick app via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. But when you do that, you're going to want your phone pretty much right next to the camera, because the Wi-Fi antenna is buried inside this case and it's metal, so your range is super limited. So they're recommending if you use this metal case version, you're going to want that you want that phone right next to the camera here so that the app works. But for me, I generally recommend you use the QR code app. It's a lot faster to change your settings. You don't have to wait for a connection, and that connection may or may not be very, very reliable. So that's what I would recommend, is use the QR code app. That works pretty reliably well. All right, so we'll take a quick look at these two stacks. I'm not going to cover all the specs here. I'll list some of them here on the screen. Basically, I'm just going to show you what they look like and give you some thoughts on what I think they could be in terms of good or bad. And I'm not sure what these may or may not go to in the future. You'll have to sort of wait and see. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. But this is the 30 by 30 version. We'll look at this one first. And we've got the flight controller here. You can see we have all of these connectors, and they have, I'll show you those inside here, and they have like the little retainers so that they won't get pulled out. But this is an F722. You can check the link for the price. I believe it's currently discounted, so not 100% sure what the price is currently. You can buy it in terms of just the flight controller and the ESC separately, or you can buy it as a complete set in terms of the whole stack. And then I believe both of these come with either an MPU 6000 gyro or an ICM gyro. And I'm not sure, there's no way to know what you're going to get. I think they do that because the supply changes. And so if you definitely want an MPU 6000 gyro and not an ICM gyro, you'll have to contact Flywoo directly and see if they can arrange that. But my guess is that's going to be pretty tough to do. You may not even get a response back for something like that. But anyway, this specific flight controller that I have has the MPU 6000 gyro. You have your F722 MCU. You have all of your connectors nicely labeled there. I'm not sure how easy or clear or sharp that is coming out on video. I can see it pretty easily, so it looks like it probably, I mean, you're probably gonna have to pause the video and see what these are. All these solder pads are on the bottom side here, like this. You flip it over here, you have 5V BEC, 9V BEC. I think this is a black box chip for, I think, 16 megabytes, pretty big. Betaflight OSD chip there. And then, of course, as I mentioned, all these solder pads for your different UARTs, different connectors, they're all on the side. They're good size. They're not huge. They're not too small. This should be fairly straightforward in terms of soldering. I don't think most experienced people have too many issues with soldering to these pads. I think these are fine in terms of the size. The 10-volt regulator on this one is controllable via Betaflight settings. So if you want to, say, put the 10-volt regulator on a switch in your transmitter, you can do that via Betaflight settings and toggle it on and off. So that's going to be for people that are using like an O3 air unit or some sort of air unit that's going to maybe overheat. If you're going to be sitting on the ground for a while, then you can flip that switch on your transmitter and turn the power off to the video system so that it's not consuming power and overheating. Obviously, for people with the O3 system, or if you're using like the DJI remote V1 or V2, that's going to be a problem because once you flip it off, you won't be able to flip it back on again. So it's obviously going to be people with like separate receivers, like Express LRS, Crossfire, etc. So just want to make sure that that's pointed out. USB-C for the connector, and there's your bootloader button here. And the silicone grommets here are white, pretty nice, nice and soft. And then these are for M3 screw holes. You're gonna have a connector for your wire loom to goes to the ESC, and then also one that goes to your DJI system. I think it's one of these two. And you can see how the two boards stack up against each other here, like so. You can kind of look at it like this. So there's plenty of space there between the boards, and then you also kind of get an idea of how thick those PCBs are. Here's a look at the ESC. This is an 8-bit ESC, I believe. Got some solder pads here for your connector if you want to directly solder to your flight controller, and then you have your connector for the wire loom that goes to the flight controller. Pretty big solder pads here for your motor wires. Not super huge, but I think more than adequate size for this. And giant pads for your battery connector there. And then all the pads are also on the bottom. You got little holes there for your capacitor. And there's a closer look at the MOSFETs on the bottom here. Looks pretty standard. And you have solder pads for the motor wires on the bottom as well. So here's the stuff that comes in the package as well. So you have a pretty big XT60, and then these are see what gauge wire is this, 14 gauge wire, so yeah, that's pretty adequate. I think for most 5-inch is going to be fine. And here's the capacitor and all of your connectors there. You can see they all have the little retainers, and then some of these will go to, as I said, to your O3 air unit or whatever. And then you have your M3 screws here. They're 22 millimeters long. So, and then you have a bunch of washers and nuts and stuff for mounting. And of course they do include some documentation here. So again, even though it is silk screen on the board, you'll want to refer to this in case you can't read this if it's too small. So here is all the connectors documented, as well as a little bit of some more specs there at the bottom. And then here is the other side of the board, all the solder pads, again, all nicely labeled here. So definitely don't lose this, or save this video. If you lose this, you can refer to this later. Alright, so moving on to the 20x20 board. So this is obviously, they're calling it the mini version. And here's a look at the flight controller, and you can see on mine that has an ICM gyro, not an MPU 6000 gyro. It's got the F722 MCU there, USB-C for the connector to Betaflight, and then you have the connectors on this side on the top, as well on the top over here, as well as the solder pads being on the same side, not on the other side. So interesting. So I think these probably correspond to these pads. We'll have to look at the documentation, but again, you have the connector here in the bottom, and then the solder pads over here on this side as well. You can see none of these are labeled in this one. Obviously, that's because the size of this board's a lot smaller. And again, we have a 5-volt and 10-volt regulator, and again, this one, for the 10-volt regulator, you can switch it on and off via Betaflight settings. 16 megabytes of black box data, your Betaflight OSD chip. And here's a look at the ESC. Again, pretty big pads here, especially for a 20x20. Big pads for your battery connector and your little holes for your capacitor. And quick look at closer look at all the MOSFETs here. This is a 40 amp 8-bit ESC. So I think this is the bottom, and yeah, that's where that connector is for the wiring loom, and this is the top. So you have the motor wires can be soldered to the bottom or the top of the board, same with the battery connector. And then you have your solder pads for the connector that's here. In case you don't want to use that, you can directly solder to these pads over here. And this one comes with an XD60, not an XD30. Kind of wondering why they don't include both, because a lot of times these 20x20 boards will go into a micro, and XD60s are kind of overkill. Again, you have all of your connectors there with a little retainers, it looks like. Yeah, the same thing, same retainers there for those connectors. And then you have your capacitor, M2 screws for mounting, and your washers and nuts and spacers. And again, this is the included documentation. Pause the video if you want to take a closer look at that. Yeah, it does look like they kind of correspond. So this connector here, as you can see, TX2, RX2, etc. And then you have your, looks like 4 motor wires, S1, S2, 3, and 4, and then 5-volt ground and cam on this connector here, and then similarly over here as well. And then you have like ground, 10-volt ground over here. So there's a few extra pads over here that don't correspond to a connector that are available here. But yeah, again, if you want to see what these are, just pause the video, and then again, you got some specs over here in the bottom. This is the bottom side of the board, and again, pause the video if you want to refer to this in terms of what you need to solder to. Okay, so I'll cover for this video. I'll link all these parts down in the video description. Yeah, I know that people ask me what the image quality of the Hero 9 is like, and yeah, go back about 5 years and you'll see a lot of videos on that if you're wondering what the image quality of the Hero 9 is. That's probably why you're not going to see that on my channel. But yeah, I expect this to work just fine, because I've been using the Hero 11 naked from Flywoo for a while now. So this has appeared on my channel, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and it's had no issues whatsoever. So I'm assuming that the board and stuff, the parts, electronics are similar inside. I expect this to work just fine as well. So I'll link everything down in the video description. Got any questions, let me know. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.